So lots to discuss with Nikki and Jim this morning. Has Andy Burnham's first 100 hours as Prime Minister been hopeful? Just how important is a good night's sleep? And is it time to abandon the Commonwealth Games?
You can get in touch with your views on all of this. You can text us 87222, start your message with the word Times, or WhatsApp us as well, 0333 003 2353. First, let's discuss this. That's The Fall, with the clues in the title there. Hit the North, which is exactly what Andy Burnham is doing today. Number 10 North opening its doors for business for the first time. Can he prove it's more than just a gimmick? Jim, let's start with you. When you were in the Cabinet, how would you have felt about diverting time, energy, resource, personnel to two separate locations?
Well, look, from my constituency down in Weymouth, I'd have found it a bit of a struggle to get up to Manchester for the National Economic Council, which I was on in 2010. But so it's taken me a little while to adjust to the idea. I was initially a sceptic, but I think I get it, that Andy does want to substantially change the way that things are run. He does want to take things out of Whitehall, and therefore to assemble a new team out of Whitehall, planning and delivering on how to get power and decisions out of Whitehall, I think makes sense. There are dangers attached to it, but I think what he's done in assembling the office of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, bringing some resources out of the Treasury, for example, beefing up the power of number 10, because compared to the Treasury, it's a minnow, means that he's got a better chance of getting done what he wants to get done, and I think it's worth a shout.
You said, Jim, there are some dangers associated with it. What do you think those risks are?
Well, the obvious one would be, we've seen all these changes of Prime Minister. If every Prime Minister comes along and decides that they want to move a number 10 operation to their constituency, then you'll have constant disruption. So, we've got to hope that Andy stays around for a long time and that number 10 North has a chance to establish itself and prove itself, and then it becomes a more permanent thing. That's the biggest risk, that and the quality of the Avanti train service from London to Manchester being a bit rubbish.
Yes, and also just the realities of the commuting time. I mean, obviously Prime Ministers travel a lot, but a lot more people, civil servants, etc. People have got to be relocated. There's quite a lot of sort of infrastructure that's got to be moved. Nikki, are you convinced that it's a good idea?
Well, I am a fan of this, let's start with the train services. I mean, I think it's actually not a bad thing that those people who often sail, into London, used to commuting not very far at all, get used to what the rest of us face, which is, several hours. If you want to, I don't live in London, and it's a 2-hour trip, door to door for me to get to Westminster or most other places in London. Sadly, East Midlands trains have been making it even harder and longer recently. So in a way, actually, this is part of it, which is actually getting people who have assumed that everything is based in London and the South East to understand actually some of the challenges, including transport, in the rest of the country. So I think actually having another base outside London is a good idea. It's what many large businesses and organisations do anyway. They'll have offices around the country, and I think also it's about breaking down what is not working in Whitehall at the moment. Lots of people who see things the same way, think the same things, aren't asking the hard questions. Actually, as we many of us will know, if you move location, if you take people out of where they normally sit, where they normally talk to each other, meet, and put them in another location, actually somehow it does make people think and behave differently, and it sends a signal to the rest of the country that it's not all about London and the South East. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that the minister you're talking to, you're right to ask questions. So what does this mean? We'll have to see what happens. But devolution is not just about having an office somewhere. It's about really thinking differently and giving power to other parts of the country, and that obviously is very much a kind of we're on wait and see at the moment.
And fundamentally, Nikki, I can't escape the feeling that actually when number 10 North engages with voters will simply see an outcome, a decision that's made. They won't necessarily say, oh, and that's because it's in Manchester, or will they? Perhaps I'm skipping a beat here, but I just feel like people are looking for delivery. And sure, the Manchester HQ might shape the decision-making process, but how much voters connect that with Manchester, or just say, well, thank goodness they've done that, or that's a terrible decision. It's the outcome they're looking at, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. It's the outcome that they will feel. But I think the point is exactly one you make, which is that if putting people in a different place, which creates a different outlook, means that you make better decisions which more closely reflect, people's lives, or challenge or support and answer the questions and the issues that people have, that's got to be a good thing. And I think, and I always remember a conversation I had with a constituent in one of my villages, years ago, and he said to me very earnestly, he said, "Do you have to go to London very often?" And I said, "Yeah, I have to go every week," because I've never been to London. And I think we shouldn't underestimate quite how many people London is a very, I think Stig and Kate were doing something on London, was it yesterday or the day before? London, it feels different from the rest of the country. It is different, it's exciting, it's got an international vibe, but for many people, it is a faraway place that has no relevance to their lives. So if they think that their key decision makers and advisors are sitting somewhere outside London, that's a good thing. But you're right, ultimately, it's about the decisions made and the impact they have, positive or negative, on voters' lives.
Yeah. And so, Jim, I suppose we need to be alert to what evidence there will be that this isn't a gimmick. For you, what would be a very visual, obvious demonstration that this Number 10 North project has been a success or is a success? And I suppose, crucially, how early can that realistically come?
Well, Andy said he wants this to be felt in every postcode. That's a really high bar. I used to represent a constituency on the coast down in the southwest, a long way from Manchester, a long way from London. And if we can really feel like those coastal towns have more hope, have a stronger sense of what their industrial future looks like, have a stronger sense that their young people don't want to leave in order to get on, but want to stay where their families are and have a really good future for themselves. That in the end is the test, and it's a tough one, because all of our economic thinking for the last 40, 50 years has been about you build from the cities outwards, and that hasn't worked very well for the periphery of the country, and that for me is what's going to matter.
And I guess, Nikki, if we were to sort of go on to review Andy Burnham's first few days, he didn't need Number 10 North to announce the things he's announced this week, did he? He's done all of that without his HQ opening its doors today. But when we think about VAC coming off electricity bills, when we think about the £2 bus fare cap in England, when we think about the changes he's making to business rates in England as well for pubs, etc., how would you, politically, how would you review this first week? Politically, should they be pretty happy, Team Burnham?
Yes, look, I suspect that exactly that the Prime Minister and Number 10 are pretty pleased. Can I just say, I totally agree with Jim's point, which is that actually one of the great tests of this postcode growth in every postcode will be, do people feel they have to move to London or away from where they've grown up in order to make a success of their lives? And that has become a thing, and I think that's something that this government could absolutely challenge. Look, I think exactly, I do think that this been is it only 100 hours? Gosh, it feels like longer,
so.
Really.
Approximately, we worked out, yeah.
I think he has had a good week, helped, I have to say, by Parliament not being in recess. That is a masterstroke of timing and no accident, I'm absolutely certain. So not great for parliamentary democracy to have a new Prime Minister that hasn't been scrutinised by Parliament this week. But if you are a Number 10 sort of advisor, business manager, you'll be very happy. But look, I think there are some big things. We're not going to discuss it, but the article in the Times this morning about the threats to RAF Fairford, for example, the oil price having reached $100 a barrel, all these things will come crashing back into the new Prime Minister's party pretty quickly. The other good news, not just his announcements, but inflation being down. That is, we'll see if it stays down, everything else, but that must be something that Number 10 were very pleased to see that headline too.
A message reaches us from Times Radio's own Daryl Morris, who has sent me a screen grab of flight radar. He says, as an enthusiast of aviation, politics and Manchester, I'm very excited to tell you that Andy is on his way to Number 10 North.
But by plane, not by train.
He'll be flying down from Glasgow, I presume.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just having a little look. Yes, I think he might be at Prestwick Airport by the look at this. Anyway, he'll be flying down after the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony. So thank you, Daryl, our Manchester presenter and correspondent.
Jim, I wonder for you, it's been a very busy start. Obviously, the team was assembled on Monday. On Tuesday, we learned on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, we had 3 different policies. One was the cap on bus fares. The other was VAT on energy bills being scrapped. And then also we've now heard that pubs, clubs and music venues will have tax cuts as well. Is this the start you imagined? Is it full of hope? That's what Andy Burnham wanted to drive through on Monday.
Yes, I think it's been a reasonable package. He's also been out and about. He was in Bath and Bristol for the buses. He was up in Glasgow last night. He's also been phoning everyone for his reshuffle, which is why it's taken quite a while. And I really like that he's personally wanted to be able to do that. You wonder, anticipating a further item when he's actually slept. I think that the package of announcements gives the right message that he means business, he wants to get on, and he wants to make a difference to the cost of living. How
does it compare, Jim, to Keir Starmer's first initial impression, which was sort of saying, roll your sleeves up, everyone, this is going to be tough?
Yeah, I think Keir and Rachel made, in the end, the mistake of thinking that they could do what David Cameron and George Osborne did when they kicked off, which was to say, look, we've got this horrible economic inheritance. It's all the fault of the last government. And so we're now going to do austerity. And I think Keir and Rachel thought they'd play the same trick and say, look, this is all terrible. It's even worse than we thought. There's a £22 billion black hole in the books. And so we've got to make some really tough decisions. And so they sort of lost a sense of hope and momentum that a change of government can give us. And that was one of the mistakes that meant that in the end, however dignified Keir's exit was on Monday, and I think his integrity is profound. In the end, there was a set of mistakes that meant that his communications were just off for pretty much the whole of the 2 years.
Really interesting. Do stay with us, Jim and Nikki. Lots more to discuss, including the alluded to sleep pattern of Japan's Prime Minister and just how unhealthy and irresponsible it truly is. And also the Commonwealth Games. Have they had their day, basically? It seems like these Commonwealth Games that have just begun in Glasgow, is it sort of passing us by a bit? How engaged are you with the Commonwealth Games? We'll discuss that in the next few minutes.
Next up for discussion, Japan's Prime Minister sleeps for at most 3 hours a night. This is Sanae Takaichi. She says her intense workloads mean that keeps her up so late at night, she has to get by on just those 3 hours. That's even less than Margaret Thatcher, who famously said she slept for 4 hours. It's attracted a lot of criticism in Japan, a nation where long working hours have become a public health concern. Nikki, is this performative? Is it actually something that you should be really worried about?
Well, look, I think obviously it's a personal thing, and I think it became clear after she left office that Margaret Thatcher may well have only actually been, in bed for 4 hours, but she had perfected the art of the power nap, and apparently they're meant to be very good for you. I hesitate to talk about this because talking to 2 breakfast presenters who I suspect feel slightly permanently sleep deprived.
We're high-functioning sleep deprived this morning, I think, both of us.
But ignoring sort of people who've got unusual shift patterns, yes. Obviously people do have to do it. But I can find people are they are quite showy-offy about their sleep in one way or the other. Either it's pride to say, I got 9, I always get my 9 hours, or I only need 4 or 5. Nikki, that happens. We seem to indulge a little bit in our sleeping habits.
Well, I think that you're right. It has become slightly competitive, and not helped by the fact that if you've got a watch, which I have, which tells you the quality of your sleep, it's become a sort of completely unhealthy obsession to look at it in the morning. And rather than thinking, well, actually, how do I feel? Do I feel I've had enough sleep, or do I feel rested? You're sort of watching to see what quality it's had. So, but at the end of the day, 3 hours seems to me to be very little. And the sleep expert you had on, I mean, sleep is a really important thing, and I think we understand more and more now about the health benefits benefits of getting the right amount of sleep, and particularly this point about what your brain is doing to recover, and how it can, potentially prevent or help to prolong your brain's health for a good number of years if you've had the right amount of sleep. So I think it's probably not the thing. Look, the thing that struck me from it was what are her private office doing? I mean, that's exactly what your officials are there to do, which is to help you to prioritise and not have to wade through so much paperwork that your sleep is compromised. So hopefully they will have got the message that there's more they can do to help their boss to not have such a bulging red box.
Yes, Jim, is it actually a sort of inefficiency of the team around her?
Yeah, look, I think there's something in that. I agree with Nikki that there's a delegation issue. You shouldn't be working those long hours. It's not healthy. You need to have time to reflect if you're going to make good decisions, and part of that reflection happens when you're asleep. I think it's frankly fairly ridiculous, and it sets a bad message to young people as well. Nikki and I both worked on online safety and the impact of phones and so on our children and young people, and part of the message to them is you need a good night's sleep in order for your body to heal, in order for your brain to reset. And if you're not doing that when you're running a country, I think you've got a problem.
Yeah, but also, Jim, does she not have she's got a responsibility to run the country as best she can and how she best sees fit, absolutely. Does she also have a responsibility not to put undue pressure on the people in Japan to say, all right, follow my example?
Yeah, absolutely. We all are different. I happen to need 6 to 7 hours sleep a night. Otherwise, I get really grumpy if it gets below 6.
Do you follow the example of the Prime Minister on these sorts of things, though? Really? I don't know if anybody does. I wouldn't follow Andy Burnham's sleep pattern.
You're right, Calum, but if you're working directly for Andy, Andy's calling a meeting at 3 a.m. And he's saying, well, how come you haven't read that 50-page document that I gave you at 11 o'clock last night and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, then you do have a problem where you're asking something unreasonable of the people around you.
I get you. And that's a fair point, I suppose. Shall we go on to the Commonwealth Games? I'm just wondering if, Nikki, if you're engaged with the Commonwealth Games, we see, we know what the good of these things is/are. We know that it's, exciting, but I feel like the opening ceremony kind of crept up on me and suddenly it's here and it's kind of been and gone, and here we are. I don't know, do you feel as engaged with the Commonwealth Games now? And I ask that because there is a bit of a question mark as to whether they should have happened at all, whether they are a thing of the past. What do you think?
So I think, all right, Richard, they have sort of crept up on us. I think that may be where Lord Macdonald might be hiding this morning or over the weekend. So I think, look, as you say, it's good for Glasgow. And I think part of the issue is, of course, that Glasgow stepped in, didn't they? Yeah. Sort of fairly late in the day, because I think the Australian state of Victoria decided they couldn't or didn't want to host them and everything else. Look, I'm quick plug. I'm obviously sitting here in Loughborough University, #1 for sport in the world. Lots of athletes, love these games because it's great practice for them on the international stage. They get to sort of see their peers and fellow competitors and everything else. And so on that basis, I think that they definitely have, a place. And I think that the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth is important. They're important relationships with countries around the world. So I think, in a way, part of the reason I think that the UK government is involved is the sort of soft power element of all of this.
And do they need a rebrand? Is Commonwealth still sort of appropriate?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's modernised and very different relationships now with countries who are part of the Commonwealth. But the fact that the Prime Minister's been up there's probably been all sorts of side conversations going on, as there always are, at these events. But I think it's a shame that we haven't really had more coverage, and maybe that's I don't know who's that down to. Maybe lots of us could have made more of it, really.
Well, we're getting lots of messages saying basically that, Jim, that actually a lot of the kind of lack of buzz is because it's not being shown on terrestrial television, on free-to-air TV.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you, Calum. I kind of woke up to it probably yesterday that it was happening.
Totally.
And that feels odd. You could argue that the World Cup sucked up all the oxygen in terms of sports reporting, and then the Open Golf, but those have been gone for a few days, and so I don't know what happened this week. The sports news was all about a bit of transfer speculation and and probably a bit of cricket. But why wasn't there a bit more about the fact that the guy who's just broken the world record for the mile is going to be running in Glasgow at the Commonwealth Games? There are stories that could have been told, and it feels like a bit of a miss.
I mean, Jim, I wonder what you make of this question that's been texted in by Chris, who says, if the Commonwealth Games were held in London, would they have been more successful?
Well, look, they were held very successfully in Birmingham.
And in Glasgow previously.
And in Glasgow previously, yes. So, those were with a proper run-up, and maybe that will have made a difference.
Yeah.
I guess your correspondent there's a hint of truth that obviously there's a lot of media based in London, and they might have noticed things a bit more, if nothing else, because there might have been a bit of disruption and they'd have asked a few questions.
Thank you both very much. Good to have you both on this morning. We appreciate your thoughts and your takes on everything we've been discussing. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Jim.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Have a good one.
Fun.
Speak soon. That is Lord Knight, former Labour Minister, and Baroness Morgan, former Conservative Education Secretary.